tragedy in India.
There are still unanswered questions surrounding the Air India crash.
The Boeing 787 Dreamliner has a stellar safety record. This is the first fatal crash.
Now, investigators are studying the cockpit voice recorder from the Air India plane, which
Investigators are looking to answer what brought down the plane.
Families have gathered outside the civil hospital in Ahmedabad.
There were 242 passengers and crew.
There are tragic scenes in the Indian city of Ahmedabad.
Breaking news, local hospital officials now confirmed to ABC News there is one survivor after a passenger plane crash near India's Ahmedabad airport with more than 200 people on board.
It started like any other flight. Parents were calming restless toddlers. A student was scrolling through their playlist. A businessman was texting boarding now before switching off his phone. Somewhere in the back, someone was saying a prayer. At 6:13 a.m., Air India Flight AI171 lifted off from Ahmedabad. Its destination was London, but it never got there. Less than 4 minutes into the sky, something went terribly wrong. People in nearby villages looked up and saw the aircraft descending fast and oddly tilted. Then came the sound, a deep mechanical roar that ended in a silence that's hard to forget. What followed was chaos. The plane had slammed into the side of a medical college, bursting into flames. Emergency crews arrived within minutes, but it was already too late. Over 270 lives were gone, except for one. One man, a survivor, was burned, bloodied, but conscious, standing near the wreckage like someone who'd just stepped out of a dream that wasn't his. Who was he, and how did he live when no one else did? And what actually happened inside that plane? This story takes place in the unsettling space where facts blur and answers stay out of reach. Let's begin. There's a hushed coordination inside every plane before takeoff. Screens glow dimly, fingers tap out final messages. The safety card lies untouched in most laps. On the morning of Flight AI171, that stillness settled over the cabin like a veil. Passengers adjusted neck pillows, and flight attendants secured the aisles. Nobody knew they were boarding a flight that would never land. There were 242 people on board, and every single one of them had a story. Khushbu Raj Purohit was 21, just married. She'd been home for her wedding and was returning to London to start her new life with her husband. She posted a photo at the airport before boarding. She didn't know it'd be her last post. A few rows behind her, the Vyas Joshi family had boarded together, parents and 3 kids under 10. They had just wrapped up a long-awaited family trip to visit grandparents in Gujarat. Photos show them smiling in temples, eating street food, doing all the little things people do when they're surrounded by people they love. There was Lawrence Christian, too, a British citizen. He'd come to India to bury his father. And just when he thought the hardest part of the journey was over, he found himself aboard a plane heading straight for disaster. Among the passengers were doctors returning to NHS jobs, IT consultants heading to client meetings, grandparents holding babies, students carrying backpacks and snacks for the long flight. There were 53 British citizens and 169 Indian nationals, a few from Portugal and one from Canada. Different passports, but one shared fate. Up front in the cockpit sat Captain Sumit Sabharwal. He had 8,000 hours of experience and possessed a calm that comes from knowing every sound a plane should make and which ones it shouldn't. Beside him was First Officer Clive Cunder, just 34, still early in his career but already trusted with thousands of lives in the air. At just 625 feet, the plane called for Mayday, and then it fell. The last text sent from the plane was by a 19-year-old student. Just took off, see you in 9 hours. Her phone was recovered near the wreckage. She never made it to the 10th hour. This was a plane full of moments, lives in progress, dreams mid-sentence. And it's only natural for this incident to send shockwaves through the world of aviation. The descent happened fast. Just 33 seconds after takeoff, Flight AI171 lost contact with air traffic control. From the tower's window, controllers watched as the aircraft struggled to gain altitude, then began veering and dipping unnaturally low over the city. At 625 feet, barely 2 football fields off the ground, the plane dropped from the sky. It slammed into a building in Magani Nagar, which is a densely packed neighborhood just a few kilometers from the Ahmedabad airport. The impact site was the BJ Medical College Hostel, a place where medical students were resting, studying, and preparing for exams. The crash tore through 3 floors of the structure and ignited a massive fireball on impact. Emergency sirens blared across the city within minutes. Firefighters arrived at a wall of heat and wreckage. Residents described the sound as something between an explosion and a scream. Black smoke coiled into the air as pieces of the fuselage continued to burn. The wreckage stretched across rooftops, through windows, and into the lives of people who had nothing to do with that flight. Debris was found scattered blocks away, even inside homes. More than 270 people died, including those on board and dozens on the ground. Some families lost multiple generations in a single moment. What had started as a quiet afternoon in a residential neighborhood turned into a disaster site before people even understood what they were looking at. There was no time for a controlled descent, no time to reroute, no time to save it. It happened too fast, and yet among the destruction, someone moved. A man crawled out of the burning debris. His clothes were torn and his body was bloodied. He was the only survivor. People rushed to him, barely believing what they were seeing. But before that, one question worth paying attention to is, how did an aircraft with one of the cleanest safety records in aviation crash just seconds after takeoff? There was no storm, no terrorist threats, and no visible external damage. The daylight was broad, the weather was perfect, and yet a modern aircraft fell. How? In the wake of the crash, investigators have homed in on a few key theories. Each points to a crucial moment that turned a routine takeoff into a catastrophe. Both engines failing on a commercial jet during takeoff is something nearly unheard of. Flight AI171 was powered by 2 incredibly reliable GE GEnx 1B engines. Just 500 to 625 feet off the ground, seconds after liftoff, both engines appear to have lost thrust. 1 second the plane was climbing, next it was falling. And here's what makes it scarier. These engines are designed to fail one at a time, not together. For both to go out simultaneously, that's raised eyebrows across the entire aviation world. Engineers, regulators, and pilots, they're all asking the same thing. How could this happen? Because if it was mechanical, it was a failure written into the system itself. Inside the cabin, passengers saw something strange. The lone survivor, Vishwas Ramesh, described it as a brief moment of surreal silence. Then, lights flickering green and white, and then nothing. Like the entire aircraft had just blinked. That moment matters, because it suggests a total electrical power loss. Besides the dying engine, the systems that support it, including hydraulics, avionics, and the brain of the plane, died too. And in the Boeing 787, that's nearly all electric. When you lose power in a 787, the plane tries to save itself. It deploys something called the ram air turbine, or RAT. It's a little spinning propeller that juts out of the fuselage mid-flight to generate emergency power. And in this case, it did, which means the plane was already in survival mode just seconds into its journey. The flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder have been recovered and are being analyzed as we speak. The boxes might tell us if the crew saw warnings, if they had time to react, and if they tried anything to pull up. Right now, we don't have that audio, but we do know this. There was a Mayday call. It was sent out less than a minute after takeoff. There were no words, though. This suggests that the situation deteriorated too quickly for full communication. Whatever happened in that cockpit, it came fast and left no room for options. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner has never, until now, had a fatal accident in its 14 years of service. Not one. This was supposed to be the safe plane, the modern plane, the aircraft built for fuel efficiency and long-haul travel. And today, that spotless reputation is fractured. Because now, both companies are being pulled into the center of this investigation. Every 787 using GEnx engines is under scrutiny. Airlines are grounding fleets. Inspectors are rechecking electrical systems. Regulators are rerunning safety drills. In the midst of the fiery wreckage and unimaginable devastation, one man emerged and walked away from death's shadow. His name, Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, a 40-year-old British Indian seated in 11A, right next to an emergency exit. Within seconds of impact, he found himself in a surreal battlefield of flames and falling debris. In his words, "For some time I thought I was going to die, but when I opened my eyes, I realized I was alive. I unbuckled my seatbelt and just crawled out." He vividly recalls that pause midair, The plane came to a standstill for 5 to 10 seconds, he said, and the green and white cabin lights flickering before the impact. According to what his family told the media, he instinctively tried to save his brother AJ, who was sitting elsewhere on the plane, but AJ didn't make it. When Vishwash stumbled onto the street, his white t-shirt was soaked in blood. He was rushed to Ahmedabad Civil Hospital with burns on his hand, chest injuries, and deep bruises. But what doctors noticed even more than the physical trauma was the shock, the kind that sits behind the eyes, one that doesn't leave easily. He stayed in that hospital for 6 days. Then he was discharged. Experts say it may have been the exit row seat, or the exact way the fuselage broke open, or just instinct, or luck, or all of it. But no one can say for sure why seat 11A was the only one that made it out. Today, Vishwash carries something no one else does. The memories of that day, the silence of those around him, the unbearable truth that he walked away and his brother didn't, and the burden of the voices he heard and didn't hear inside that cabin. In the crash's aftermath, the Indian government moved quickly. Within hours, Prime Minister Modi was on the ground in Ahmedabad. He offered prayers at the crash site and met with survivors and first responders. He described the disaster as profoundly heartbreaking and promised full support to the victims' families, including 1 Indian rupee crore in compensation per family. The Civil Aviation Ministry, led by Ram Mohan Naidu Kinjarapu, set up a 24/7 control room. Rescue operations were coordinated within minutes, and by the end of June, emergency drills were ordered at every major airport across India. More than that, the DGCA has demanded pilot training and flight dispatch records. It also launched enhanced safety inspections on all 33 of Air India's Boeing 787s and flagged maintenance weak points, even while affirming no faults with the aircraft itself. Air India's chairman N. Chandrasekaran urged employees to use this tragedy as a motivator to sharpen safety standards. But behind the scenes, the pressure is mounting for the airline, for Boeing, for everyone involved in building and maintaining the aircraft. Boeing's leadership quickly stepped back from the spotlight. It canceled all the appearances at the Paris Air Show and dispatched a team to India. GE did the same, sending in investigators to join the probe and analyze what went wrong inside the engines. Around the world, governments expressed condolences. The UK activated crisis response teams in both London and Ahmedabad, though grieving families criticized the outreach as disjointed and painfully slow. Messages poured in from leaders around the globe. Everyone mourned the tragedy and offered help. As for India's aviation authorities, the DGCA released a cautious update. Boeing's 787 fleet was given a clean chit for airworthiness. But they didn't let Air India off the hook. The airline was urged to tighten coordination across departments, ensure proper spare parts were available, and revisit how maintenance was being managed. Because right now, trust in the system is hanging by a thread. Flight AI171 was supposed to be a routine flight, a simple arc across the sky, from Ahmedabad to London, from home to something ahead. But it became a tragedy that no one was ready for. Not the families, not the airline, not the nation, and certainly not the world. In those 33 seconds, lives were undone and families were shattered. If this story moved you, honor it by remembering every name, by holding space for every family, and by demanding answers that matter. We'll keep following the investigation. We'll keep telling the stories that deserve to be told. Until then, thank you for watching. Hold your loved ones close tonight and never take a takeoff for granted.